We believe it gives too much power to groups to influence the process. Nothing would stop someone from trying immediately after a contentious election to immediately file for a petition to recall. And that puts people in a revolving, every 2 years you're going to be looking to run again.
That's Illinois Sheriff's Association Executive Director Jim Kychek yesterday during the Senate Executive Committee on a bill that would allow for county boards to ask voters if they want to allow for the recall of a countywide office holder. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and get the newsletter in your inbox. Just go to thecentersquare.com. So part of the questions of ethics in Illinois has been, how do we keep bad actors from doing bad stuff, right? And there's tons of different answers for that. Everything from term limits to, more criminal liability and such, but we don't really see too many movement on these types of pieces of legislation. There's also been a conversation, especially in Chicago, with the issue of recall, and can we recall certain elected officials? Now, we do have recall for the Illinois governor, but people argue that it's far too high of a burden to supersede, too high of a hurdle to jump over, and makes it difficult for people to try to even recall the governor. And the recall amendment came about after the whole Blagojevich saga, but we have limited powers when it comes to being able to recall local elected officials or even state house members or members of Congress, for instance. So when it comes to the issue of recall, it surfaced back up, not just with the ethics conversation, but with what happened, I believe, last year. Sonia Massey, a Springfield resident, calling the local county sheriffs, the Sangamon County sheriffs, about a prowler that she felt was outside her house. When the sheriff's deputy showed up, she ended up being shot 3 times or something like that and died. And the sheriff's deputy who pulled that trigger faces murder charges and is currently behind bars while the Illinois Supreme Court deals with whether or not he's going to be free pending trial. So that's an entirely different conversation. But locally in Sangamon County, and you guys may have remembered this, there was immense pressure on the Sangamon County Sheriff, Jack Campbell, at that time to resign. And then they had, a citizen movement to have a recall of the sheriff because they felt that the sheriff hired this deputy who pulled the trigger and shouldn't have, because the deputy had a checkered past of sorts. So there was a lot of calls for Sheriff Campbell to either step down or to be recalled. And the Sangamon County Board said, we don't know if we can do a recall. We have to have the legislature provide more clarity on recall. So ultimately, though, Campbell, he did resign. He retired. And that was after immense pressure. Even the governor of Illinois, if you guys recall, you can go back and look at the archives of this show and you'll see that. But the governor, for like a week straight, was asked about should Sheriff Jack Campbell resign. And Pritzker was pretty adamant. So State Senator Doris Turner, Democrat from Springfield, she spelled out her measure that would ultimately allow for the recall of certain countywide state office holders in this bill passing the Senate Executive Committee yesterday.
This bill, Senate Bill 1954, is an opportunity to address a concern that my constituency had in order to clarify whether they have the opportunity to recall a countywide elected official. Again, this legislation, when passed and signed by the governor, will provide counties and the county boards an opportunity to put this on the ballot at the 2026 election only, and then sets about a process by which you can move forward with recall of a countywide elected official.
And it's one of those things where the county has to approve it for the citizens to be able to sound off on it. And it wouldn't be for every county-wide elected office. It wouldn't be for any other elected office like state house or mayor or school board member or things like just county-wide office holders. So, like a clerk or a sheriff, for instance. So here is the Illinois Sheriff's Association's Jim Kychek, you heard at the beginning there, talking about how they support another measure that Senator Turner has concerning some reforms that law enforcement could implement. And here's him talking about that particular aspect. Dan, go.
It's one of the reasons why ultimately you saw us as a support on Senate Bill 1953, trying to address the issues of background and investigation on employees to get the information that's necessary to try to keep people from this from taking the position or getting the position. I also want to express my condolences to the Massey family for all they've been through. This is certainly something that law enforcement is not proud of at all. And it pains me to be here today because of those things.
So Kajcek wants to make sure that things are above board. Turner has two bills right next to each other that touch on this. It's Senate Bill 1953, a Police Records and Sheriff Board is what it is. And we'll take a look at this real briefly here. This was not what was being discussed yesterday. So let's pull this up. And the overview, it amends the Police Training Act, provides no law enforcement agency shall make an offer of employment to the position of probationary police officer and other positions. Continuing here, if the individual to produce and make available for inspection employment records, including background investigation materials collected in connection with making an offer of employment, duty-related physical and psychological fitness for duty exams, and really just provides for more oversight of previous employment records and such. But that, again, is not the measure that they were discussing yesterday. The measure they were discussing was giving the county board in a county outside of Cook County, because apparently Cook County has this, to do recall of countywide elected officials. And Kajcek says, listen, I mean, I understand that, but he worries that recall could be abused.
I think the challenge that we run into with this particular issue is that we're just talking about countywide offices here. We're not talking about county board members. We're not talking about other elected officials. So we're holding people to a different standard, and I think that's something that we would like to see further explored. I certainly do want to recognize the efforts, again, that Senator Turner has made in terms of getting to where we are. She and I have had probably to ad nauseum for her many conversations about this. But with that said, she's always been gracious in those conversations. The other questions or issues that we've got is that this undermines the principles, potentially, of electing good officials. They're always going to be concerned about making decisions that are right for the communities that they represent. And sometimes those decisions are difficult ones to make. We believe it gives too much power to groups to influence the process. Nothing would stop someone from trying immediately after a contentious election to immediately file for a petition to recall. And that puts people in a revolving, every 2 years you're going to be looking to run again.
So couldn't that make for just tumultuous times, especially in a district where the race was 51 to 49, and then all of a sudden this community comes together and they push for a recall and they get out in the media and just drum this up, and then you get into this constant conflict, and how it could possibly be abused. Senator Sue Rezin, a Republican from Morris, she also shared some of the possible problems she sees with this.
For example, say the state's attorney prosecutes someone and it's just not a popular case, but it is the right thing to do, and a group decides that they want to implement this recall process against the state's attorney. So, I mean, my concern, I understand what you're trying to do, but my concern is that it may also give certain groups, as the previous person said, a little more power than they deserve in trying to remove an elected official, county elected official, who maybe is making a difficult decision that may not be popular.
And it's interesting to hear these arguments. Again, sometimes in the ethics conversation we have at the State House, and I know ethics have been elusive when it comes to getting new reforms in place to hold people accountable before federal prosecutors step in 10 years after the fact. But recall has been one of those things in the conversation. You've even had Democrats in Chicago looking to have an easier path to recall the Chicago mayor, for instance. But when it's a targeted type of recall, which this seems to be, again, it would only be for countywide office holders, excluding the treasurer. Apparently, there are already provisions in law, according to Doris Turner, that the treasurer can be recalled, but not for any other local countywide elected office holders. But it's not just Republicans pushing back on this. You've got Democratic State Senator Laura Murphy pushing back on this as well, saying she's not a fan of the idea of recall.
Question that when a community member is murdered by those that should be in a trusted position, there's a response that's required. However, I am concerned about recall because I believe the problem for me with recall is it negates a vote, the voters' ability to elect officials. And then you are totally disenfranchising those that voted for a particular person, and then you're removing them from office. And that is totally contrary to what the voters' wishes had been. And so...
And it disenfranchises, that's what she says. We'll see how this goes. There seems to be bipartisan opposition to this idea and more of a willingness to take up other measures, like saying, hey, sheriffs have to really comb through a potential candidate's record when it comes to a position on the sheriff's department and other law enforcement agencies. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. That passed out of committee. We'll obviously track that to see how far that goes throughout the legislature. It's what I do every day. Go to the State House, watch these guys do what they do, and report it back to you here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Here with YouTube each and every weekday morning at 8 o'clock live. Get the segments, get the news clips, not just of Illinois, but all across the country. We've got a great team at the Center Square, and get the headlines in your inbox. Go to thecentersquare.com and sign up for that newsletter.